Welcome to the Orca. Since the early 1970s, every British Columbia driver has been forced by law to purchase their automobile insurance through the government-owned Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, or ICBC. But ICBC is not aging particularly well. It's on pace to lose $1 billion this year, and Attorney General David Eby has called it a dumpster fire. The crisis also brings opportunity. At their recent policy convention, BC Liberal members voted to support opening up ICBC to competition, and the leader, Andrew Wilkinson, even hinted at selling it off completely. Aaron Sutherland is the Vice President of the Insurance Bureau of Canada, which represents private insurers right across Canada, and also supports opening up ICBC to competition. And Aaron joins us here in the Orca studios. Hello there.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Aaron, let's put it a little bit of history. ICBC. We all know why it was created, but what has happened?
So I think what's happened with ICBC is something that often happens anytime you see a monopoly over any marketplace, and that's you don't have the incentives right, and long-term decisions and innovations and things that improve the efficiency of that corporation aren't made and aren't undertaken. And so we've seen a steady deterioration of ICBC's finances since around 2012. And unfortunately, rate increases haven't kept up with that. The previous government limited the rate increases ICBC was able to bring forward, and instead of building efficiencies within the own corporation to try to remove some of its operating costs, they simply withdrew and lowered their capital to make up the difference. And unfortunately, today we're seeing the effects of that, where ICBC has very little capital left.
It's saddled with a huge debt.
Yeah, I'm not sure it has debt, but it's certainly costing taxpayers billions of dollars annually now. And I think Minister Eby's been quite right to call it a financial dumpster fire. And unfortunately, it's British Columbian drivers are the ones that are now paying the price for this and feeling the consequences.
We've had lots of people suggest what they would do with it. From your standpoint, what would you do with ICBC?
I think the number one thing we need to do with ICBC is better incentivize the corporation to operate as efficiently as possible.
So what does that mean?
That means the same thing it means in every other aspect of our lives. Introduce competition, put the power in the hands of BC drivers, give them the opportunity and the choice to shop around and take their business elsewhere. And if ICBC knows that they have to best compete for your business, that means they have to ensure they're delivering the best product at the best price with the best possible service. Otherwise, you'll go elsewhere. Until we force them to do that, force them to meet our needs, incentivize them to change their behaviors, I think ultimately we're going to continue to pay more than anyone else in this country for auto insurance.
But do you think ICBC is able to compete with the private industry if you introduce private insurers to BC?
Well, that's the big question. Unfortunately, ICBC isn't as open with their financial statements, with what's going on in the marketplace as other regulated insurers in this country are. And so we don't have a really clear window into what's going on at ICBC, what's driving these rates up, what creates higher operating costs for that corporation. And so the only way to know if they compete is to open them to competition and see, if we open ICBC to competition, give drivers choice, either ICBC can compete currently, or they have to significantly change their operating structure and bring in those efficiencies, bring in that innovation that's been missing in this province to deliver better service for your dollar.
Could it be done overnight, or would you have to slowly phase in the private sector as they moved into BC?
Well, it's really just a legislative requirement that prevents private insurers from competing here. And so if you opened up the legislation and you allowed private insurers to compete on the mandatory product, as they do in most other Canadian provinces and virtually every other jurisdiction in North America, they could then begin to enter this marketplace and compete with ICBC. You would also have to force ICBC to be much more transparent in terms of the claims and other marketplace incidents that are going on in this province. Currently, we don't know the claims trends and things that are going on here in BC to the same degree that we know what's going on in Alberta with accident rates and where those are taking place and what's driving those, similar to what we would know in Ontario and other provinces. ICBC doesn't release that information. Private insurers would likely need that to be able to best compete with ICBC, but if you just want to bring them in, you just have to allow them to do so. They are eager to come to this province to better serve BC drivers.
How likely is that to happen, though, for ICBC to cooperate like that? Because it's going to take a fundamental change in culture, because the ICBC has been around for 30 years, and there's a whole culture attached to it now.
Closer to 50 years. You know, you're entirely right. It would require a change in culture. ICBC certainly doesn't want to provide that marketplace data so that insurers can better compete. It's one of the reasons we see very little competition in the optional auto insurance marketplace. There's only 2 private insurers that compete with ICBC for your optional auto insurance business, and that is because ICBC doesn't share its marketplace information. Private insurers are prevented from being able to even know what your accident history is. ICBC knows how many accidents you've been in, what your driving record is like. Private insurers don't have access to that data. And again, these are things that, you know, this is a way that a monopoly uses its market position to prevent competitors, and ultimately it's not serving the best interests of BC drivers.
What's your suggestion?
My suggestion is just open it up to competition. Make it just like virtually every other aspect of your life. Allow drivers, if they like ICBC, to stick with it. And if they don't like ICBC, they don't like the price they're paying, they don't like the service they're getting, to take their business elsewhere.
What happens, though, if you have ICBC now competing with the private sector, and the private sector clearly is taking customers away from ICBC? Doesn't that decrease ICBC's asset base and run the risk of it collapsing while it's still got clients?
So whose interests are we serving in that situation?
Correct.
You know, are we trying to protect a crown corporation just for the sake of doing so and balancing its books on the backs of BC drivers? Or are we really trying to improve affordability in auto insurance? You know, affordability is a massive challenge in this province. We see it in housing, we see it in, you know, the price of gas, and we see it in the auto insurance marketplace. This is one area where there's other Canadian insurers eager to come to this province to deliver a better service at a better price than they're getting now.
So let me put it to you this way. Would it be not better then to just say, as of, pick a date, January the 1st, ICBC no longer exists, it's open to the private sector, period, done?
You could do that as well. You'd then have a lot of questions around what happens to, you know, ICBC staff, how that transition takes place. That could be a little bit challenging, but you could certainly do it. Might need to give a little bit more leeway than January 1st. But
I didn't say next year. It could be the year next year after that.
So certainly that is one option. Again, I think we need to start thinking about the interests of drivers and less about the interests of our crown corporation. We need to put drivers in the driver's seat. We need to put them first in all of our decision making, and we need to make sure that we're doing what's best for them and what's best for their pocketbook. And frankly, if we introduce competition into auto insurance, we gave them the choice to shop around, that could bring significant savings to British Columbians, and I think that would be ultimately a very good thing.
So Aaron, I'm going to put you on the spot. Final question. What does your gut tell you? What do you think is going to happen?
My gut tells me, you know, we're going to continue to see the current government bring in significant reforms to ICBC. I do think they're to be commended for the actions they've taken. A lot of what we're seeing will help ICBC's finances. They are very difficult decisions that are very tough for any government to make, and so I think Minister Eby and his government do deserve some kudos for that. But again, they aren't going to reduce prices for drivers, and that is the challenge here, and that's where we need to see someone else delivering this service if we want to truly improve the affordability going forward. And so we've seen some of the opposition parties, you know, certainly Andrew Wilkinson at his recent convention had some interesting to say about ICBC. I think he compared it to a 1973 Pinto, which I don't know if you know, they had a reputation for exploding, so maybe that's where the dumpster fire comes from. But you know, interesting comments there, and we'll see what the future holds.
All right. Aaron Sutherland, a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Pat. Cheers.